Are you planning to share your wishes, or would you prefer a surprise this time? James inquired with a grin, wrapping his arms around his wife. Let's go with a surprise. You always orchestrate them so well, she answered. With International Women's Day on the horizon, the husband aimed to delight Evelyn with a thoughtful present. They had long since covered all the essential kitchen gadgets, so this time he wanted to craft something truly memorable. They decided to enjoy a long holiday weekend together. Soon enough, the final workday arrived. The couple shared a swift breakfast before heading off to their respective jobs. As Evelyn walked into her office, a wave of joy washed over her. All the men had planned a surprise for the women. Each lady was met with flowers and gifts, and live musicians had been arranged for the celebration. It was evident that the day's work environment was far from intense. In fact, it had a decidedly laid-back vibe. To top it off, as the workday drew to a close, there was yet another surprise in store from her colleagues. As the evening fell, a congregation gathered around an impromptu table, led by the esteemed senior manager, Lucas. Colleagues diligently placed appetizing plates on the table, while Lucas graciously extended his congratulations to the ladies on behalf of the entire team. He then proposed an engaging contest to heighten the merriment. Displayed before him were sturdy envelopes, each concealing delightful desires and profound impressions. With anticipation, the female employees eagerly plucked an envelope, followed by selecting a tightly rolled parchment from an adjacent bowl. Unfurled before their eyes was the name of a male colleague entrusted with fulfilling the enclosed wish. The room erupted in applause, marking the commencement of the game. The contents of the envelope spanned a spectrum of requests, ranging from a week-long supply of coffee to the transportation of essential documents. The contest invigorated the women, evoking gleeful laughter and jovial banter amongst all. It was Evelyn's moment to select an envelope. She approached the table, reached out, grasped one, and carefully tore it open. As she quickly scanned the contents, a flush crept to her cheeks. "Well, Evelyn, what does it say?" the women exclaimed, nearly bursting with curiosity. "A night at the theater," Evelyn replied softly. "Oh, how delightful. Now I get to choose a charming gentleman," Evelyn said, eyeing the men standing in line with caution. One colleague, Mason, was staring at her intently. At last, she dipped her hand into the bowl full of names and withdrew a folded slip of paper. To her surprise, it bore Mason's name. As Evelyn announced his name, the women erupted in applause, and the man beamed, giving Evelyn a playful wink. The competitive segment had come to an end, and now all the coworkers dispersed to the tables adorned with delectable treats. After a short while, Mason made his way towards Evelyn. "So fancy a trip to the theater?" He initiated the conversation, accompanied by a beaming smile. "Seems that way," the lady responded with a hint of awkwardness, her gaze averted downwards. "There's a fascinating new production making its debut soon. A close friend of mine is involved. I'll inquire about securing the finest seats," the coworker continued with great enthusiasm. Evelyn had long observed Mason's tendency to bestow more attention upon her than their other colleagues. He possessed a sociable nature, yet he actively sought out opportunities to cross paths with her, frequently approaching with greetings and inquiries about her well-being, even offering aid in the most mundane of situations. Of late, his compliments had become more frequent, often laced with playful innuendos. Nastya felt a general sense of contentment from Mason's attentiveness, but now his assertiveness left her puzzled. He was well aware of her marital status, yet he persistently pursued her. She found herself hesitant to respond. "Well, isn't that marvelous?" Mason exclaimed abruptly, not even waiting for an answer as he casually draped his arm around her shoulders. A few days later, Evelyn found herself preparing to go to the theater. She tried to reassure herself that this was merely a friendly rendezvous, nothing more. Fearing that her husband would become jealous, she refrained from mentioning that she would be accompanying a colleague. Instead, she informed him that she would be meeting her friends at a cafe prior to the festivities. Tonight, she walked in right on schedule, But something was off. Her eyes kept darting away. Typically, she'd chatter nonstop to her husband about her get-together with friends, recounting every detail. But this time, she was oddly quiet. She mentioned she was tired and headed to bed without much fuss. James chose not to pester her with questions, but he couldn't shake the feeling of bewilderment at her sudden shift in demeanor. The joyous day arrived. In the early hours, James brewed his better half's preferred Java and whipped up a delectable breakfast. As she stirred from slumber and entered the kitchen, he greeted her with a lovely bouquet. "Sweetheart, happiest of holidays to you," he proclaimed, presenting her with the fragrant gift. "Thank you, James, that's awfully kind," she uttered, beaming with appreciation. "But wait, there's more. I've come to realize that experiences often bring more delight than material possessions. It's been far too long since we've indulged in any cultural affairs, so I cordially invite you to the theater," the doting husband declared, extending an envelope containing 2 tickets. "We were lucky to secure them after weeks of selling out. You wouldn't believe it. Seems like quite the remarkable spectacle." Evelyn gingerly opened the envelope and beheld the name of the same production she had recently attended with Mason. Her husband keenly observed the transformation in her countenance. "Evelyn, did the gift not please you? I remember how much you loved going to the theater, so I thought." No, everything's fantastic. I truly liked it." His wife hastily cut him off. She made a choice to hold back the fact that she had already attended the premiere, knowing it would spark 100 questions, and she certainly had plenty to keep to herself. One day, James finished work a bit early and thought it would be nice to pick up his wife from the office. He kept it a secret from Evelyn, aiming for a little surprise by taking her to their favorite cafe. He arrived at the main entrance ahead of time and began to wait for her. After a little while, he noticed the staff starting to trickle out of the building, and soon after, his eyes landed on his wife. She was standing there, chatting with a man. As he helped her into her coat, James's heart raced and tension coiled in his chest. He had already stepped out of the car and was making his way to the entrance when, out of the blue, the man said goodbye to Evelyn and dashed back into the building, as if he'd forgotten something important. Evelyn stepped outside and spotted her husband. "James, hey there. Have you come to pick me up?" she exclaimed, descending the stairs with brisk excitement. It was evident that she was taken aback. "Yes, I wrapped things up early today," her husband responded curtly, casting a glance over her shoulder. "And who might that be?" The wife turned to him, surprised, as if she was oblivious to his implication. "That fellow who was talking to you," James elaborated, fixing her with a serious gaze. "Oh, he's just a coworker," Evelyn brushed off dismissively. Noticing her husband's lingering tension, she opted to steer the conversation in a different direction. "So, are we heading home now, or do you have other plans?" she asked, a warm smile lighting up her face. James mumbled home under his breath and walked toward the car. He wasn't in the mood for dining out. Observing that colleague's lingering gaze on his wife gnawed at him. Despite her reassurances that nothing was amiss, he couldn't shake off the feeling of unease creeping up on him. A few weeks slipped by. Come Saturday, the couple had plans to hit the theater for a performance they had tickets for since March 8th, a gift from the husband. The man was itching for a break. He'd been feeling worn out lately. After the first act wrapped up, they stayed in their seats, deep in discussion about the storyline and the characters' actions. Even as the 3 bells chimed, their debate raged on. James reached for his phone to find more information on the play. He stumbled across a news article published the day after the premiere, and to his shock, he saw photos not just of the actors, but of the audience too. Astonished, James spotted someone in those photos, his wife, Evelyn, but not just her. She was with a man he recognized. This man worked in the same office building where James often fetched his wife from work. The theater lights dimmed, and James turned to confront his wife, showing her the photo on his phone. There she was, cozying up with her colleague. The premiere was on the 6th. You said you were with your girlfriends, didn't you? James whispered, locking eyes with her. Evelyn's eyes met the screen, and immediately, all color drained from her face. She looked utterly crestfallen. James, she stammered, barely making sense. I don't know what to say. Hand over your phone now, her husband ordered firmly. Tears welled up in Evelyn's eyes as she hesitantly handed over her phone. Just a few moments spent glancing through the messages revealed to her that she and Mason were far more than merely coworkers. Overwhelmed, she buried her face in her hands, succumbing to tears. Her husband, sensing the gravity of the situation, guided her out of the auditorium. It was clear that the show would not be continuing for them that day. Evelyn stammered out apologies, desperately trying to explain herself, but her words came out as mere gibberish, lacking any real sense or coherence. James, who was typically composed and level-headed, found his patience waning amidst the turmoil. They engaged in a heated exchange that seemed to stretch on infinitely until the theater staff asked them to vacate the premises. That night, Evelyn steadfastly refused to return home with James, leading to the following morning when all her belongings were unceremoniously removed from their apartment. Evelyn pleaded repeatedly for her husband to find it in himself to forgive her, insisting it had all been a dreadful mistake and a misunderstanding. Yet he had no interest in hearing her excuses. He simply couldn't fathom how she could behave so cruelly. Rather than dragging the matter out any further, he chose to end their union, cutting off all communication with his unfaithful spouse. He had lost his appetite for this tragic drama.